hopefully you were able to see the bio of our guest speaker. I first met Amy in 2008. Her and her colleague came into the Alliance and were talking about how they were introducing a program through some various sponsorships and a very set and determined way to help communities enhance themselves with economic development, to take advantage of their bicycle trails particularly, but outdoor recreation in general. One thing I noticed about Amy was her very sharp wit, but most importantly, her dedication to what she really believes in. And this program was I would just say a linchpin, hopefully for her, but she has gone on to expand herself with entrepreneurism in her own consulting work, and now she gets to help many communities and states, and I believe even internationally. So we are very privileged to have Amy available to come and talk to you all a little bit about what we believe is a very strong direction for us all to go and that we've been going in, and hopefully she'll solidify that with you a little bit. But would you please give a warm Oil Region welcome to Miss Amy Camp.
Good morning.
You might have to adjust that.
Okay. How's this? Yeah? Okay. So, Dan, if you don't mind with the slides, how's everyone doing today?
Good, thank
Yeah?
you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you, John and Kim and Barry. I really appreciate being here, and I appreciate your partnership and all of the great work that you're doing in the oil region. I live in Pittsburgh. You saw a slide about the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail, so I feel very much connected by way of trail and for other reasons as well to this area. I have, I think, about 25 minutes today. If I get to 20, oh, your eyes did something when I said that. Is that okay? If I get to 20, Kim or John, if you can let me know, I'll make sure that I finish on time here. So we're going to be talking today about how communities have permission to thrive. I'm going to be talking about trails and communities, and whenever I was first invited, it was in the context of trails and communities in a post-COVID economy. Well, we're still in it a little bit, but I think I still have a few things to say about where we are headed. But I'd like to start. Let's see here. I'm just not advancing, so these things, they always work whenever you are before the meeting starts. I might need some assistance with advancing slides. Thank you so much. I'd like to start with Hamilton. Are there any Hamilton fans here this morning? Oh yeah, I see some hands. So those of you who know the song about the Battle of Yorktown, one of the most crucial battles of the Revolutionary War, probably the most crucial battle. You know how that song goes. The song builds and builds just like a battle might, and there's lots of drama and tension, and then finally near the end, when the battle has ended, the ensemble sings the words, "The world turned upside down." And they repeat it, "The world turned upside down, the world turned upside down." If I could carry a tune, I would sing it for you. But the most powerful global empire had just surrendered the battle that would ultimately end the war. The world had turned upside down. And I've thought a lot about that refrain over the last 18 months. In March of last year, when COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic and Governor Wolf issued stay-at-home orders, it very much felt like the world had turned upside down. In fact, just the other day I heard someone saying our lives were turned upside down. And I knew he was talking about COVID without needing any context. If I can take you back to March of last year, schools were closed, non-essential businesses were closed, people were stocking their pantries and sanitizing their groceries. Restaurants were just hanging on by a thread. We weren't going to concerts or movies or to our local coffee shops. On a personal note, my travel was all canceled, and I claimed unemployment in the month of April last year. Life had become drastically different. And I say none of this to make any sort of a political point. It's just a recognition that similar to how the world shifted with America's independence, our world changed as the result of the pandemic. Slide, please, Dan. This is a sculpture called The World Turned Upside Down. And I thought you all would like to see that. That's in London. And there is a connection to Hamilton with that as well. So what we did have, slide, last year was access to nature and the time to enjoy it. We had trails, rivers and lakes, mountains and backyard bonfires. And the pandemic resulted in a mass rediscovery of the outdoors. We have known for centuries that being outside in nature contributes to health and wellness. Lots of things happen. Our blood pressure goes down, our stress hormones decrease, our creativity increases. And in 2019, research published in the journal Scientific Reports even told us how much time we need to spend outside each week to reap those benefits of being in nature. Does anyone have any guess of how much time you need to spend outside in a week to reap the benefits? Just throw some numbers out.
20 hours.
20 hours a week, okay? 3 hours a week. Anyone else? 10 hours a week. 2 hours, 120 minutes. Slide, please. That's all we need. A lot of us want to be out there a lot more than that, though. And so beginning in March of last year, a lot of people now had the time and desperately needed the healing qualities of the outdoors. But even then, we weren't sure whether we could contract the virus while being outside. There was so much we didn't know. Was it airborne? Could we pick it up by touching a park bench or a swing set? There were studies about people's respiratory signatures and how long your air droplets stay in the air when you're biking and running and walking. There was a lot we were just trying to figure out at that time. Slide. It's no wonder there were articles with headlines like, "Is it okay to take a walk?" This is all to say that life did change last year rather significantly, and that includes for trails in the outdoor economy. Today I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about how the mass rediscovery of the outdoors impacted Pennsylvania trails and the trail economy. Second, I'm going to talk about ways communities can better connect to and benefit from trails. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the importance of aspiring for thriving communities. Slide. But let's start with that mass rediscovery of the outdoors and how that impacted Pennsylvania trails. Slide. Early in the pandemic, the Pennsylvania Environmental Council hired me to research the impact of the pandemic on trails. And so what our team did was we surveyed trail managers in the spring and again in the fall. And we talked to them and learned from them about what they were experiencing right there on their trails, because they know trails better than any of us. We also looked at electronic counts and tried to understand what was happening, and to measure what was happening with trail use. But those managers, they shared stories of overflowing trails and parking lots, increases in litter and illegal uses, stories of I told you that part already, delayed maintenance, delayed construction, losses in revenues to their trail organizations. And they were saying things like, slide, every day is like a weekend day now. Slide, please. And the trail is busy all the time, every day. I mean, there was a huge uptick in trail use, and it's not just about trails. It's going down to your river. It's going to your state game lands. People were getting back to the outdoors. Slide. And trail counts confirm these sentiments. The Rails to Trails Conservancy reported that in the early weeks of the pandemic, trail use surged by 200%. And throughout 2020, use was up 51% over the previous year. Slide. The counters in Pennsylvania, these are the ones that we analyzed, they were generally consistent with this as well. You can see that increase in March and April, and then there was a little bit of a decrease throughout the year, but the numbers were still up over 2018 and 2019. So whether this increase was a good thing depended upon the type of trail you manage, its location, your organization's ability and capacity to handle the increased use, and even your personal outlook as a trail manager. So we did survey the managers on their perceptions. We wanted to know what the people closest to trails thought about what was happening. If you could go to the next slide. So here's what they thought. 60% of them in the spring thought that the pandemic's impact on trails was mostly positive. Only 17% of them across the entire state thought that it was mostly negative. And by the fall, when we surveyed them again, 75% thought it was mostly positive, suggesting that some of their early concerns had been alleviated by that time. The perception varied based on length. If you had a longer trail that was a destination type trail, you were losing tourism. You were losing, visitors coming to visit your trail. If you had a natural surface trail, it probably was suffering from having way too many feet on the trail as compared to a rail trail, which could handle increases in use. If you were in one of the state's most populated areas, the overcrowding was a real concern for people. I'm happy to say that trail managers here in Northwest Pennsylvania reported the most positive outlook in both the spring and the fall surveys. I haven't had a chance to talk with any of you in great detail about this, but I would feel comfortable saying that increased trail use in this area was a positive thing. So a couple of other things on this slide. Managers also told us that trails were being perceived as positive outlets in their communities. 9 out of 10 managers told us that. And 80% of managers told us that they were seeing new people out on the trail, new demographics. And so for those of us who do work in trails, that's everything we've always wanted. We got it all at once, but it's everything that we always wanted, was getting more and new people out to enjoy nature. Slide, please. It's worth noting that the pandemic's impact on the outdoor economy wasn't entirely clear. Bike shops, which were deemed essential businesses because bikes serve as a form of transportation, were swamped all year long. However, just as they were as busy as they had ever been, there were other trail-serving businesses that were struggling to keep afloat. If you can think of businesses like outfitters, shuttle services, B&Bs, and trailside cafes that normally rely upon visiting trail users, they lost a significant source of income last year. It picked up a little bit later in the season, but it was a tough year obviously for a lot of reasons, but it was hard on the trail economy as well. Next slide. Among the kinds of problems that surfaced or were made worse last year, you're looking at them, overuse and crowding, trip cancellations, losses in revenues and sales taxes. Some trails even closed in more populated areas. There were definitely some hardships. So although trail managers' outlooks were generally positive, 2020 was a tough year to be caring for trails. Our report title was Increased Use, Added Strain, and a Newfound Appreciation. I think that tells the story pretty well. Trails, we concluded, need support now more than ever. Slide. One way to support trails at the community level is to adopt a trail town mentality, which is what I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes. First, though, let me say that despite a slowdown in travel, people have continued to visit the oil region throughout the pandemic. And I want to talk to you about one such couple. But first, if everyone in the room could raise your hand. Everyone. Okay, very good. Now, keep your hand up if you've ever written a letter to the editor. Okay. Continue to keep your hand up if it was positive in nature. Oh, wow, you are writing positive letters, except for John. Okay, one more. Continue to keep your hand up if you sent that letter to a publication located in a place that you've visited, meaning someplace other than your own local newspaper. A few hands. I see 3. Okay. So I have an aunt who lives in Franklin, Nancy Sheddick. Her son is Doug Fazell. Some of you might know him. She sent me a newspaper clipping earlier this year. And the letter to the editor is titled Franklin, Surrounding Area, Leave Lasting Impression. Next slide. So this is the letter. Some of you probably saw it. I'm going to read it to you. She says, this is Mary Ann Padlick of Litchfield Park, Arizona. She says, my husband and I recently visited Franklin. We came from Arizona because of the bicycle trails. Oh, and because it is 102 degrees in Arizona. We rode both the Allegheny River Trail and the Samuel Justice Trail. It is clear that all the surrounding communities support the bike trails with the resources and volunteers. Signage was clear, and the trails are in great condition. We are enchanted with the area. Franklin is a delightful town. We ate at several local restaurants and stayed in a local hotel. The downtown Franklin is full of interesting shops and, in better times, local live theater. I understand that hiking trails are also abundant, not to mention boating and fishing. Although we did not visit surrounding towns, they all seem equally full of history and vibrancy. This outstanding recreation area is a well-kept secret, which will not be a secret much longer. We'll be back. Did anyone see that whenever it was? Yeah, lovely. Mary Ann lives 2,100 miles from this area, and she was so stricken by this place that she wrote that letter. It's letters like this that tell me that communities in the oil region have been doing great work in the realm of trail towns. Next slide. So some of you don't really know what a trail town is, but you are living in them. A trail town is a community through which, I can't really read that. It's just like a few feet too far away from me. It's a community through which a trail passes that supports trail users with services, promotes the trail to its residents, and embraces the trail as a resource to be protected and celebrated. If you're looking at the pyramid, you know, it's a town along a trail that embraces its trail and outdoor recreation at some level. And there's a trail economy that builds up around the trail. And most importantly, the community sees the trail as being integral to its identity. There's a pride of place. There's a pride of having, this, resource in your community. And that essentially is what it means to be a trail town. Slide. Another way of putting it, I heard somebody once say that to be a trail town is to make the decision to pay attention to trails. There's a decision at the community level and at the regional level to invest in them, to celebrate them and to promote them. Slide. And so John was talking about the Trail Town program that I worked for back in the mid-2000s. And that was a program that started along the Great Allegheny Passage in Somerset, Fayette, Westmoreland counties, Allegheny County. And that idea it was a program for rural, regional economic development that we were doing along that one trail. Well, that program has since been exported to at least 28 states, as well as to Ontario. The map, shows anything in green is where there's some kind of a trail town presence. Slide. Like I said, the first program started here in Pennsylvania. And after some years, the Progress Fund, which started the program, actually expanded to this area and did some trail town work in Franklin, Emlenton, Frostburg, maybe Titusville. So that's sort of like the origins of the program. Slide. As I said, it's a regional approach to economic development. Slide. And the numbers show that trails really do benefit regional economies. We were doing research, throughout the life of the program. There was research done before we even started, and you can see that there were like increases in economic impact attributed to that trail system over the years, and the numbers now, almost a decade later, have increased even more. Slide. But here's the thing, the economic piece is really important. It's the hook that gets people interested. It matters for our economy. Trails and tourism bring new life into our communities. But what I noticed over the years was an overemphasis on that one benefit, that economic benefit, and started to turn to thinking a little bit more broadly about the benefits of trails. Led mostly by this quote by Otto Leopold. He said, "A system of conservation based solely on economic self-interest is hopelessly lopsided." Slide. And so for that reason, I wrote Deciding on Trails, going back to the idea that communities face the decision to invest in trails. Go ahead with the slide. And in the book, I outline, and talk about the history of trail towns and what that has meant for communities around the country. And then I move into talking about best practices that I think communities can follow in order to better connect to and better benefit from their trails and better enjoy them. So those practices, I'm just going to quickly share them with you, are to adopt a shared vision throughout your community, to physically connect your trail to your town so that it's easier for people to move between the two and it's safer, and the invitation into your town is more alluring. Another one is to extend an invitation to this. Now I'm getting into the realm of hospitality, to make people feel welcome, both people coming into our communities as well as our townspeople going out to enjoy nature. Cultivate a trail culture is the fourth one, and that is, to me, the most important. It's like the one that holds up all of the others. If you don't have a culture that celebrates and enjoys trails, that I believe that economic benefit will be somewhat limited. You want to know your market, who's using your trails. You want to share your community story and commit to quality trails, because there are thousands of trails around the country. We have to make sure that the trails in our area are of the kind of quality that people want to use and enjoy them. There are a few other best practices that didn't really merit having a whole chapter, but I wanted to mention those are the ones at the bottom here. If you have dysfunction in your community, you want to address that. It's hard to do good work if you have dysfunction simmering beneath the surface. You also want to work regionally. One community working on its own, doing this kind of trails and tourism work, it only gets you so far. You want to work with your neighboring communities. And then finally, don't rely primarily on trails. The presentation we saw earlier showed a number of different ways that this organization is working on revitalizing and preserving the heritage of this area. Trails and tourism are just one piece of that puzzle. Slide. So just a few photos here. Physically connecting the trail to town is one that people are always interested in. You do that with bike lanes. You do that with interesting art that draws people from the trail toward your community. You can do that with signage. You just have to find ways to draw people in. Slide. Extending the invitation. This is like the fun stuff of trail towns, and this is the fun stuff of community revitalization. Not that signs are so much fun, but our signs do help us to welcome people into our places and to give them the direction that they need. Again, art, sidewalk chalk, This is in Connellsville along the Great Allegheny Passage. A high school student did this. We spent $75 to have her go out on a Saturday and to do this really wonderful welcoming globe. I didn't realize globes would become like a part of this presentation until I just looked at that again. But you don't have to pay an artist to go out. You can send a group of kids out and welcome people, make people feel welcome to your place. And art, by the way, is a vibrancy indicator. People coming through a community, and if they see art, they sense something is happening here in this place. More important than visitors sensing it, your local residents are sensing it and feeling it. Slide. You want to share your story. Does anyone know the photo on the left? That's in Petroleum Center. Yeah, and this gentleman was, sharing a bit of the community story whenever I passed through. And the photo on the right is of an itinerary that I wrote for this area maybe about 5 years ago for a client. And I just wanted to read the first sentence of this itinerary. It says, easily accessible from Erie, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, these trails blend lush woodlands, remarkable histories, friendly towns, craft breweries, and a regional delight, ham loaf. I was really into ham loaf whenever I was making my early visits up here. Slide. And then one of those other practices, and I'm just pulling out and highlighting a few of the many practices that I showed you earlier, but again, this one is to cultivate a trail culture. And I show this slide all around the country. A lot of you probably know this business in Franklin, and when people ask me, how do you know you've achieved a trail culture? And I say it's when you have a storefront like this one. Whenever the woman who owns the local yarn shop decides to put a yarn bike in her window display, and it's not just the bike, there are trail brochures, there's a pair of tennis shoes, there's a sign pointing to the bike trail. She has no business reason to do that, but she is a part of the culture of the community that appreciates and is celebrating trails here. Slide. So, to wind down, getting back to the title of this talk, which is Permission to Thrive. Does any one person, community, or region need permission to thrive or to do well? Of course not. But we are a complicated species. Fear of success is a very real thing, which really is the fear of maintaining success. For example, and success-induced guilt is real as well. If you are succeeding and doing well when people in other places around you may not be, those feelings can creep in as well. And so, for example, why is it that it was fairly easy for me to tell you at this beginning of this presentation that I claimed unemployment last year while so many people were struggling? But it's not as easy for me to say that in the time since I've had my very best year in business. It's been a good year for me. And those kind of things can be hard to share whenever, for so many others, it's been a terrible year. I am primarily grateful, but feelings of guilt occasionally creep in. And this reminds me of Brené Brown's take on joy. And I will connect joy to thriving, don't worry. If you aren't familiar with Brown, she writes and speaks about topics like authenticity, vulnerability, and the importance of human connection. And in her book, Braving the Wilderness, she writes about joy. She talks about people who can straddle the tension of staying awake to the struggle in the world while also cultivating their own moments of joy. She asks, how can I play on this gorgeous beach with my family while there are people who have no home or safety? And then she talks about the joy that she experienced while she was making cupcakes for her son's birthday. And she wondered, what difference do these stupid cupcakes make when other children are suffering? What she concludes is that they matter because joy matters. She writes, we can't fight for what's not in our hearts. It's the same with thriving. If we want to see the world around us thrive, we have to start at home. We have to allow ourselves success, prosperity, positivity, and yes, even joy. I don't have to tell you what a difficult year this has been at the global level. and for a lot of people right here at home. Even so, the oil region can pursue community vitality and resilience. Slide, please. This is just the definition for thriving. The primary definition is to prosper or flourish, and the other is to grow or develop well or vigorously. So how do communities grow or develop well? One way is to set out to be a vital and resilient place. Slide. And I mean, I can't tell you if your places have community vitality or resilience. Only you can answer those questions, but some of the characteristics are that they are communities that are able to sustain themselves. They're able to solve problems. They create environments in which residents can experience positive life outcomes, and they adapt and they transform. This past 18 months has been a time of needing to adapt and transform. I talked about the world having been turned upside down. Well, we're here in the valley that changed the world. So I believe that you are able to handle any of the changes and challenges that come your way. Next slide. Another way of thinking about strong communities, vital communities, is there's a program called Community Heart and Soul that goes into communities around the country, and I don't represent that program or anything, but I like the way they think about community change. To them, it's a resident-driven process that engages a town's entire population in identifying what they love most about their community, what future they want for it, and how to achieve it. And these are their tenets. Involve everyone, focus on what matters, and play the long game. Slide. Speaking of involving everyone, involve artists, involve youth, involve everyone, unexpected partners. By the way, I just coincidentally have interacted this year with two artists who moved to Oil City this year and reached out to me just to talk with me about trails and community development. Matthew Brew is one of them, and Marcy Hall is the other. So you have a lot of people who are deciding to, put down roots in this area and invest in this area. So I think that really brings me to the end. I might have one more slide. So this is in Franklin, one lovely foggy morning that I was here a couple of years ago. And I want to remind you that it only takes 120 minutes outside to reap the benefits, the health and wellness benefits of nature. So I hope that today is Thursday. I hope that tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, you have a chance to get out there and enjoy your lovely area. Next slide. Thank you very much. Please connect with me on my website and social media, and it's been a real honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Dan, for helping Amy.